Hi guys, it's Sophia from ATAR Notes here, and I'm here to present the Studies of Religion April lecture. So this is part of our lecture series. We host them every school holidays, but these specific school holidays, they're going across all this week. At ATAR Notes, we've got heaps of free resources from study notes, these lectures. We've got an online Q&A where you can leave questions in our discussion boards, videos, newsletters, the ATAR calculator to see if you're staying on track with your marks and your ATAR goal. We've got lots of articles on study strategy and tips and heaps more on our new website, so definitely check it out, atarnotes.com. On top of that, we do offer more resources. So we've got TuteSmart, which is our online tutoring from Elite Recent Year 12 graduate program. We've got private one-on-one sessions, but also class sessions across all different types of subjects in year 11 and 12, but also for younger grades as well. So definitely check that out if you're looking into getting into tutoring. We've got our study guides, but also Ed Unlimited. So if you're not too keen on having the physical copy, but you'd like to access the ATAR Notes study guides and topic exam books, we do have Ed Unlimited, which has all of them all in one place on one site. So if you guys are interested, those are our other resources that we have to offer. Now, some of you guys might recognize me from TikTok because I am the new content creator for ATAR Notes. But if not, and if you haven't come to a past lecture, my name's Sophia. I graduated in 2021 with a 96.3 ATAR. These are some of my marks, but obviously because we're doing an SOR lecture, SOR matters the most, and I received a 94 in 2021. So I've only been out of school for just over a year now. It still feels pretty recent and fresh to me, so I hope that can help me give you even better advice because it's so fresh. At the moment, I'm studying a Bachelor of Education so I can become a high school English and Business Studies teacher. So she's got that university teaching knowledge, but then also my experience as a student of SOR, and I also tutor and have lectured SOR for over the past year now. So we live, laugh, love SOR. A special thanks to our sponsors, La Trobe University, RMIT, Deakin, UTS, and Macquarie as well. So, the plan for today's lecture, we're going to be going through religious depth studies, and we're going to cover generally most of them. But obviously because all of you guys are going to be doing different depth studies, to go into depth on all the depth studies is going to be quite hard. So it's definitely more a skills based, looking at writing responses and the essays and structuring those. And then we're doing religious expressions in Australia 1945 to the present, everyone's favorite, the statistics. So we're going to get heaps done in this lecture today. I want to start off with a bit about SOR. And just some of the stigmas around it, some of the thoughts. So a lot of people think SOR is a bad subject. They think it scales badly. They think it's a bludge. They think there's way too much to memorize. They're forced to do it by their school, and they think that religion is irrelevant in the 21st century. So these are the kind of stereotypes of SOR. I'm here to tell you that they are all false. So number one is that SOR is a challenging subject that rivals the most popular humanities subjects. A lot of people think that it does not scale well, but in my experience, it scaled really well. It was actually one of my best scaling subjects. So for most high achieving students, it will count towards their ATAR. And as long as you're scoring Band 5, Band 6, especially that higher Band 5 and Band 6 range, the scaling is so strong for SOR. So getting into those top range marks can really help push for your ATAR, especially if it's within those 10 units. So I definitely recommend, I think SOR is such an underrated weapon, and that because there is a lot of content, it feels heavy and it can get dry, and that's what stops a lot of students from realizing the potential of the subject. But hopefully with this lecture you can realize and just come to learn how much SOR can help out with your ATAR and to not really underrate it. In terms of the relevance of religion, religion is just as relevant in the 21st century as has ever been. And the number of adherents in the major world religions are shifting around. So Islam and Hinduism are growing, Christianity is declining, and that's all in post-1945, which we're going to look at today. But yeah, when it comes to scaling, do not get too touchy with scaling. SOR has the same level of scaling as the histories, but also as biology. So when we think about like modern history or biology, you think, oh, like they scale pretty well. SOR is on the same level. So do not underrate it. I feel like people think that because it's not as a popular subject, it's not going to rival those types of subjects, but it's actually on the same level of scaling, which is why doing well in SOR can really, really help. Trust me, I'm not going to sit here and you will never hear me say that the content in SOR is easy to memorize, but it is, and it can be far easier than most subjects if you're smart about what you memorize and you prioritize your syllabus. You're going to hear me repeat myself a million times this entire lecture about how important the syllabus is, but the syllabus is literally your sacred text of SOR that gets you through, that will help you across every single question in the paper. The syllabus is your guide. The syllabus is everything. And the fact that a lot of schools force students to study SOR means many students don't take the exam seriously, which is good for you. So I personally went to a religious school, so SOR was mandatory for us, which I at first was really annoyed about because it was like, oh, well, I have to do this subject. And I can't do a subject that I necessarily want to do. But over time, especially as I came to develop the right study skills and the right study methods for SOR, even, honestly, it gets dry. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't get dry sometimes because it's just consistent content. But over time, I found that studying for SOR wasn't as much as a burden. And then I kind of found it easier than my other subjects because it was just kind of repetitive in the way that you study for it. I'm going to talk about that more in studying for SOR, which I have a whole section on, because SOR just isn't as popular. It's not one of those subjects that everyone does, or not one of the really massive popular humanities subjects. It's definitely more like mid-range in comparison to business, to the histories. So I feel like there's not as many people talking about SOR. I'm definitely in your school, but just in like the wider community. So I want to talk a lot about studying for SOR because it just needs to be spoken about a lot. But because people don't take the exam seriously and because they're forced to it, the average for SOR across the state is actually pretty low, which sounds bad. And you're like, oh, if the average low, then scaling must be bad. But the reality is that the second you get above that average, scaling like pushes you, because so many students are at that point because they're just taking it because they have to. They're not really bothered for it. They're like, whatever, it's just SOR. And that's very much a mentality. And at one point I had that when I first started. I was like, oh, it's just SOR. Like, it's just SOR. But SOR ended up being one of the subjects that helped my ATAR the most. And I'd love for it to be that for you guys too. So yeah, that is a little bit about SOR. Personally, I did SOR too, and I chose it thinking it was going to be too much content. And at different points of the year, like I said, I'm not going to lie in this lecture, I found the subject really dry and I felt like the content just kept dragging. My SOR students that I've tutored, but also in my recent lectures, a lot of the general commentary is SOR is just dragging. So do not feel guilty if you feel that way. It's definitely very content heavy, especially SOR2, which is that second extra part of the unit, the extra depth study. It just keeps going. But I just kept reminding myself to stay committed and consistent even when I felt like it was dry. And then I ended up placing first in both year 11 and 12 and then achieving a 94 HSC exam score. Personally, I use the syllabus like it was my sacred text. The syllabus is everything. I found that some HSC multiple choice questions were coming directly from the dash points, and other 5 markers were worded straight from the syllabus as well. So knowing your syllabus, and I mean it like memorizing it and having that as like a study guide, is so important for your study because it's mapping out the entire exam, and it's kind of like a little cheat sheet to what the exam is going to look like. You'll find, especially the more past papers and the more practice questions that you attempt with SOR, they all just come back to the syllabus. So having the syllabus as a base is so strong to set you up. But yeah, this is just a little bit about my experience because I don't know, I just feel like SOR, even for a lot of my friends, a lot of us found it hard at some points in the year because it just kept dragging. And especially if you're doing SOR2, usually for the lectures, we get quite a bit of SOR2 students coming in just because it's double the content and double the workload. It definitely does get heavy, but even SOR1 with the content, and it's purely just memorizing and then applying it to different types of questions. Do not feel bad and do not feel discouraged if you feel like it's dry or if you feel like it's dragging. That's such a normal experience for SOR students. Definitely just try to keep pushing yourself. You really just have to get through those moments, and having that push and that consistency is what's going to show up in the end of the year with your marks. I promise you that one. So syllabus, you're going to hear me talk about it so much. So the SOR 1 syllabus, and then we've got the SOR 2. So that's why I'm saying SOR 2 is double the workload, because you've got that extra depth study and then the 2 extra topics. But today we're going through depth studies in general and then the common post 1945 topic. So we'll be going through quite a bit across both SOR 1 and SOR 2. There's going to be 10 multiple choice on religion and belief systems post 1945, then a 5-mark short answer on religion and belief systems post 1945. Then you're going to get 15 marks of short answer on one major religious tradition, and then that's like your first step study, and then a 20-mark essay on a different religious tradition. And your exam is 90 minutes. So it's an hour and a half. You get 5-minute reading time. So fun to go through the paper and see what's ahead. But yeah, you've got the 15 marks for the first topic, then 15 marks for your first step study, and then the 20-mark essay on your second. The difference for SOR 2 is that it's a 3-hour exam. You've got the 10 multiple choice and then the 5-mark short answer. That's common with SOR 1. But then you've also got 10 multiple choice and 5-mark short answer on religion and non-religion. You're doing 2 15-mark short answers on 2 separate religious traditions, so 2 depth studies. Then you're doing your third depth study essay, 20-mark, and then you're doing another essay on religion and peace. So SOR 2 is full on. That paper is a lot of writing. It's a lot of content, and of course it's a lot of quotes across 3 depth studies, but also your religion and peace essays. It's definitely full on, which is why I admit that the content, it gets heavy and it definitely feels dry at points because it's just consistent work. But hopefully this lecture will help you feel more motivated about that. And I've got some study techniques and what was working for me, so that I didn't have to, only be studying for SOR all the time. But when I was studying for SOR, I was doing the right things. So this is the SOR 2 exam. You've got 3 hours. And yeah, the first section is 30 marks, and that's all the multiple choice. And then the 5 markers, you've got 2 of those. Then you've got 30 marks worth of short answers on the 2 depth studies. Then you've got your 20-mark third depth study essay, and then your 20-mark religion and peace essay. So fun, guys. So fun. These are the syllabuses, and we're going to start off with the depth studies. Now, obviously with depth studies, it's really hard for us when we're selecting what to do for the SOR lectures, because first of all, every school is doing different religious traditions, but then on top of that, because there's so much selection, you guys can literally see here with all the different significant people, school of thoughts, and all the different practices and ethical teachings. To pick one isn't fair to other schools that are doing other ones, and it's not like there's specific combos that every single school does. It varies so greatly across all different types of schools across the state. So we thought that doing a general one across all the depth studies, and then really focusing on those skills for writing responses to them would be a lot more beneficial, just so it's equal for everyone and we're not prioritizing certain topics and not others. And then we're also going to be looking at our favorite religious expression in Australia, 1945 to the present. When I was doing this topic, I really was not the biggest fan, mainly because of the census data. But it just felt kind of heavy. I don't know. I wasn't the biggest fan, but now that looking back and in hindsight, especially now that I lecture and tutor SOR, I actually don't think it's too bad. I think there's just a smarter way that I should have been studying for it, and should have been learning this content and memorizing it. So when we do get up to that, I'm keen to share that with you guys, because again, these points feel like they're dragging, but when you're learning from the syllabus and basing your study off that and as a guide, you'll find that it makes such a big difference. But let's get started on our block 1, which is the depth studies. So, hate to do this. I really hate to do this, but we're going to start by revising some content. So I know like year 11's in the past, it's last year, we're looking ahead to HSC. And for a lot of your subjects, year 11 is like foreign, gone, you're never going to use it again. But for HSC SOR, Preliminary SOR links so well. They really link well to each other. So don't worry. I don't want you guys to go back to like your year 11 drive and like your year 11 book or folders, notes, whatever. You can leave that. It's not like you need to memorize anything specific. I'm going to go through the specific points that you need to know from year 11 so that you can craft an impressive HSC response. I want to put a disclaimer. It's not like there's no way you're going to do well in SOR unless you put these points in. But because there's so many students doing SOR. Of course, it's not one of the most popular humanities, but it still is. There's a lot of religious schools where students have to do SOR, but there's also a lot of non-religious schools where SOR is a choice and it is a popular subject. So adding in preliminary knowledge really takes your response to the next level and just distinguishes you in the marking center, which is such an important thing when you get towards the HSC. So I'm going to be revising through that for you guys. I'm going to go through each faith to ensure all depth studies are covered. So if the slides aren't relevant to your study, you can feel free to ask some questions in the live chat. I'll be there. Otherwise, you can attempt the Christianity practice question, but we're going to be starting with Christianity because the majority of you do study it. Before I start, essential to your depth study responses is an understanding of the principal beliefs of the faith as well as the paradigm, which is like the main big belief of your faith. So whether you're writing an essay or short answer with the topic of ethics, practice, or person, the main paradigm is still so important because it provides your response with structure and increases the cohesiveness and flow of your response, but it also shows your marker that you've linked preliminary and HSC content together. So automatically you're already hitting off all that band 6 criteria by doing that. A lot of HSC questions as well are always, SOR is always the same. It's like, how does blah blah help adherents live a better life? How does blah blah help adherents or like contribute to the development and expression of faith? It's always like live a Christian life, live a good life, live out their faith, live out their religious tradition. How does blah blah show the lives of adherents? It's always very much along those lines. So it's basically just asking you, how do aspects of these religions reflect the purpose, goal, or message of this religion? And other times Nessa is more obvious, where they'll specify, and they've specified, assist in adherence to Allah, keep the covenant, and love one another. So your whole response is ultimately just discussing how the different aspects that you guys are studying allow the believer to follow the belief better. So having a knowledge of what that main belief is, and that's literally what you did in year 11, just helps your response flow on so much more. But it's adherence to those principles, beliefs of each religion that ultimately helps a follower live out the paradigm in their world, and its significant people, practices, and ethical teachings that enable them to adhere and express to those practices. So at the core still remains that principle belief. A lot of you will think, oh, it's about the significant person, it's about the practices, it's about the ethical teachings, but all of those are just like the umbrella from that like base of the belief. So how it's just going to ask you an expression. If you ever hear the word expression, it's just how an adherent lives out their beliefs and how they're expressing their beliefs. So if you're going to write about people, practices, and ethical teachings, to bring in not only that main belief, but also by doing that, linking back to year 11 content, you just know your marker, getting brownie points, you know you're going to make your marker happy. But it also helps you really neatly wrap up your thesis. So again, I don't want to press this too much. I already feel like I've been talking about it for a bit too long. But this is the best way to elevate your response. A lot of students don't have this view, but I hope that it makes sense, bringing in that content and where it fits in, but also how it's going to distinguish you in the marking center. You do have to be realistic with marking. A lot of them, a lot of the markers are marking, up to 100, sometimes even more papers in one night and responses. And especially if it's the same depth study over and over again, you don't want to just be another one in the pile. You want your one to be the one that stands out, your one to be the one like, oh, like they brought in this content, or oh, they used like this specific terminology. You want to do those little kind of tricks and I always say get those brownie points, but just having that little like snap moment for your marker can really just help boost their mood while they're marking, but also show that your paper is different to others. And this wasn't when I was doing my HSC, I wasn't necessarily using this throughout the year, but then as soon as I got to trials, I brought in this mention of preliminary content, and I saw an improvement in my marks. So I definitely recommend it. It just really makes you have a like much neater thesis, have a lot more cohesiveness, but then also stand out to your marker more. And it links back to the holistic understanding of a religion, and it flexes on Nessa because you're like, oh, you know what? You gave us this content, but I'm going to go beyond that. And then it jumps back to that long forgotten concept of living in dynamic religions. I know that's probably PTSD, but it's going to impress your markers linking back to that prelim content. So that's enough of my rant. Use prelim content. Don't go back to your folders because it's all here. So let's talk about the key paradigm of Christianity, which is just, when you hear paradigm, it's just like the main belief. The main belief of Christianity is the love commandment. So love one another as I have loved you, which is John 13, verse 34. That's the core of Christianity, is that adherents should interact with their world in the way that Jesus would have, in a way with love. And it's alternatively building the kingdom of heaven on earth. So that love commandment has a very big influence on the way that adherents are living their life, and just bringing that into any of those questions, because if they're acting in the way and they're emulating the life of Jesus, naturally they're showing love to their neighbors, naturally they're showing love to the world, to the church. Their whole lives are kind of centered around love, just as Jesus's life was. So the principal beliefs are salvation, revelation, divinity and humanity, Trinity, and death and resurrection. And all these beliefs are coming from the Bible. Now, to make the connection with principal beliefs and your significant person, your ethical teachings, or your significant practice, you can choose which ones you want to make the ties to. For a lot of the significant people, they'll have wisdom and research and teachings on the principal beliefs, but also for the practices, for baptism, for example, baptism reveals the principal belief of salvation, and being reborn and being saved from original sin. So there's all different ways that you can make those connections, but having just the general gist of the principal beliefs and just being able to make that one sentence connection can really make the difference. And then all of these beliefs are coming from the Bible, so a lot of your quotes, unless they are from your significant person or from a religious Christian leader, most of them will be coming from the Bible. I just really recommend having this quote, love one another as I have loved you. Firstly, because very good quote to memorize in terms of learning it, love one another as I have loved you, compared to some of the other Bible quotes, which again in SOR, I definitely recommend being selective with what quotes are firstly going to best help you answer the most wide variety of questions, but also which ones are going to help in terms of your memory. You don't want like these 3-verse, 4-line quotes for all these different points, and then they really build up. I really like the short and sweet quotes that really prove points. Now, sometimes there's short quotes, and I had friends that were using short quotes just because they were short, but they had no meaning. So you definitely want to still be selective and be choosing quotes that are effective. But this quote I personally used in my HSC, I still remember, love one another as I have loved you, will apply to so many different Christianity questions about living out adherence. And if you're doing Paul as well, and you're talking about agape, but that's agape, and the teaching of love, directly from the Bible, and then you can use a quote from him as well. Again, there's so many different significant people, schools of thoughts, ethical practices or ethical teachings and significant practices that you can tie these into. But this is like the main idea, and this is all you need from year 11 about Christianity. For Islam, the key paradigm is submission to Allah. So we've got, it is the guidance of Allah, which is the true guidance, and we are commanded to submit the Lord of the worlds. This means adherents should show total faith in Allah and His will, following the straight path. One of my depth studies was also Islam, and I feel like every single thesis I wrote, I'd say 9 times out of 10 was that an adherence, like to live out their faith and their religious tradition, is through submission to Allah. And then you can bring up the principal beliefs. So either use the Arabic term and then either do English translations in brackets, or you can do a slash like they're here. So we've got oneness of gods, angels, books of Allah, the prophets, afterlife, and predestination, and then you can make those links. And then these beliefs are coming from the Quran, the Hadiths, and jurisprudence. So you can use a variety. Most of my quotes for the Islam depth study were from the Quran, but completely up to you guys and what your teachers are recommending. But yeah, I think that for the depth study on Islam, a lot of the time you're going to find that submission to Allah is going to come up in your essays, and it's a very strong point to make in your thesis because it is the paradigm, that's the big belief of Islam. So I think that having that connection, not only are you having a really neat thesis, but you're also linking back to all this content, and then you can relate your significant person and what they're saying and how they're spreading these beliefs, or how the ethical teachings are reflecting these beliefs, or how through the significant practices these beliefs are being expressed. So there's always those connections you can make. I'm by no means saying you need to do it to every single one. You can just choose one or two if you like. It's up to you. Or you can have maybe one or two for significant person, then another two for ethical teachings, and then another two for practice. It's completely up to you. But just making that link, I promise you, will make a very, very big difference. Then for Judaism, which I also did because I did SLR too, so I was doing 3 depth studies. Following the halakha law. So there's this quote from Leviticus: "You shall teach the children of Israel all the decrees which God told them through Moses." So Jewish people should be guided in their religious and daily life by the laws that have arisen since ancient times. A little hack with Judaism, and I personally did it because I had Christianity as one depth study and Judaism as another. And the first 5 books from the Old Testament are also in the Torah, so they're the common text. So what I did, and you are allowed to do this in SOR because they are separate sections, I had quotes from Genesis and I think Exodus that I had used across both because there were still different sections and they're different religious depth studies. So if you are finding, and I'm not going to promote that and be like, everybody go, just use the same quotes across both, because obviously you're not going to use New Testament quotes from Christianity in your Judaism depth study short answers or in your Judaism essay. But there's definitely one or two, I think I did it once or twice, for one or two quotes across Judaism, Christianity, where they can be common. So if you are finding it hard to memorize, there are those similarities that you can kind of get around. I definitely recommend that. But for Jewish people, they should be guided in their religious and daily life by the laws that have arisen since ancient times, which is why the principal beliefs of belief in a single God, moral law as prescribed by God, and covenant are so, so important, because that's literally the entire way. And by living out and expressing those beliefs, and adhering is like guided in their religious and their faithful life. The beliefs are coming from Hebrew scriptures, so the Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and the Talmud. So yeah, like I said, I'm not going to sit here promoting, just use the same quotes for Judaism and Christianity because it is only the first 5 books of the Old Testament, but there's some really strong Genesis quotes, and then also the commandments that go across both, that are both like moral law in Judaism, but also the guidance for adherence in Christianity. So there's some overlap. That's my little hack, guys. For Hinduism, the key paradigm is to gain punya to transcend samsara. There is neither death nor birth, neither a struggling nor a bound soul, neither a seeker after liberation nor a liberated one. This indeed is the ultimate truth. So the purest example of living a good life is accruing positive karma in order to achieve moksha, and that should be the key aim for a Hindu. So Nessa gives a few more principal beliefs, but you always want to be linking the last dot point in, which is dharma, karma, and moksha, because that very much is related to transcending to samsara and living that good Hindu life. But there are obviously the other principal beliefs of gods and goddesses and Atman and Brahman, and these beliefs are coming from the Vedas, the epics, and the epics as well. I don't want to, I'm sounding so repetitive, but I also did Hinduism, Buddhism in Religion and Peace. So I technically just did all the depth studies, but I definitely recommend Dharma, Karma, and Moksha and making connections there, only because, again, a lot of the questions across the essays, but also the short answers are going to surround adherence, expressing their faith, adherence, um, living out their religious tradition, how they can be better adherents, more faithful. It's always along those lines of expression and how they're expressing their beliefs, how they're connecting with their faith. It doesn't really stray too far. I feel like there was never really a time in SOR that I saw a question and I was like, oh, I don't know what to write about. You're kind of just writing the same response, but you're proving it to different points. But even then, the points and the questions can only go so far. It's really always going to surround the adherents expressing and living out their faith and their religious tradition, and that's through these key paradigms and expressing these beliefs. And then you make that connection through living out the ethical teachings, through practicing whatever significant practice you're doing, and through following the teachings and impact of your significant person. So it all connects. I really don't want to sound annoying and I don't want it to be down your throat, but all of this connects. I really hope you can see the connection, and it's such a strong point to make in SOR because it's not being taught at every school, and it's something that's really going to make your marks stand out. I just want you guys to stand out. We're manifesting band sixes for all of you. And then we've got Buddhism. So the key paradigm is to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. So he who walks in the Eightfold Noble Path with unswerving determination is sure to reach nirvana. So Buddhists should aim to be noble in all aspects of their life. So that's speech, view, resolve, etc. in order to attain the ultimate goal of arhatship and nirvana. So the principal beliefs, and there's a lot to manage in Buddhism. So you want to choose what's most relevant and the rest you can kind of just sprinkle. So there's the three jewels, there's the four noble truths, there's the marks of existence, and then there's karma, samsara, and nirvana. Personally, I was doing religion and peace, but even if I was doing it as a depth study, I would definitely recommend the four noble truths, only because very much the four noble truths are physical acts of expression to follow in your daily life, and you can really reflect that in the ethical teachings, but also the significant practices, but also karma, samsara, nirvana, and Buddha and Dharma. But up to you guys and what's aligning with your content. Wherever you can make that connection, make it, but just make sure it's relevant ones. And then these beliefs are coming from the Tripitaka, the Lotus of Good Law, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So you can go across the different texts. But guys, those are the key paradigms. We're going to move on to everyone's favorite, the person / school of thought, the ethics, and the practices. But I'm going to finish it there on my little rant about why you should bring in year 11 content. I really hope that helps though. Even if you just, these slides are completely downloadable. There will be a button where you can download them. So I definitely recommend having a copy of these slides. But when you do come to writing responses, I promise you, if you're in that like 1 or 2 mark off and you're just like 1 mark off getting full marks, you feel like you keep getting 4 out of 5, 7 out of 8, 6 out of 7, adding in this one little touch, it's just that one missing mark is just doing that one extra step, that little extra thing you can add to your essay, and making this connection can really help you get it. I definitely saw an improvement in my marks as soon as I started using this method, and it just shows, like I said, need a thesis, better flow, better structure, because you can always go back to this. By living out this ethical teaching, they achieve the key paradigm of, and then there's always just a consistent connection. It's very much like an English essay. I hate to bring up English in SOR, but it's very much the same, where you're going to have your thesis in the intro, and you'll lose marks in English if you don't keep referring back to that thesis. So if your thesis is just really broad and it's not specific about one big belief or the principal beliefs and that connection to the question, naturally it's not going to have the best flow. Naturally it's not going to be a very strong thesis, and naturally it won't have too much connection to the question. While if you start with a really good thesis that adds in the main values from your ethics, person, school of thought, practice, and that connection to the belief and how that affects the adherent, A plus, guys, A plus. So I really recommend that. I hope that's not too repetitive of me. It 100% was, but I promise you that will be making a difference in your marks. But now that we know all that information, what's next? We're going to apply it. So We're going to apply how the paradigm, beliefs, and sacred texts need to be applied to your depth study, so it can make up your significant person practice and ethical teachings. Do not stress with these paragraphs. I'm going to go through structure and how to structure them, because it is hard. Like, it's already hard enough to talk about the ethics, the contribution and impact, and your significant practice. So I know hearing like, oh, now I got to bring up year 11 as well. I know that's not going to be very good news to a lot of you, but I'm going to show you how you can really add it in a cohesive way that makes your response flow even better and even stronger. Now there's different choices across all the different depth studies. These are some of them, but there's obviously so many. But let's talk about significant person and school of thought first. So, number one is to remember this is not a strictly historical analysis. So, even though it's important to have biographical details and they're still relevant, they're not the main focus. So, when I first started doing significant person, I was like, oh, it's on the person and their life. Especially when I got contribution questions, I thought it was so important to talk about their life and their education and how they got to a point where they could make that contribution. So even though it is necessary and it is relevant to put in biographical details, this isn't Wikipedia. This is not Wikipedia, and that's not what they're asking, but it's very easy to fall into that. So try not to get caught up in describing their whole life. You really want to focus on their contribution and impact. So what I found when I found myself, because I would find myself writing 3 to 4 lines on like their biography, and sometimes I would write about like their family life, and it's like, for what? Like, we're talking about the contribution and impact. You want to make sure that all your biographical details are connecting to that contribution and impact. So I definitely recommend, and what details are relevant is when they were born, the year that they died, their full name, and then also a note about their upbringing or their education that brought them to the position of power. Because by getting to that position of power, then they made those contributions, but that was like the stepping stone. So having the university that they studied, when they became ordained or whatever position they were in, that's a biographical detail that you're going to make, but that's relevant because it's linking to your contribution. Otherwise, not too important. Now, their birth date and their death date is important, because their death date naturally is going to link to their impact, because impact is very much more about how they're still impacting and they're enduring impact throughout time, even on our society today. So showing that, yes, they've died in this year, and for quite a lot of the significant people, it is hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but their school of thought or their teachings or their works are still affecting us in the present contemporary day. That's really good relevance and was really making a connection there. So when we're saying biographical details are still relevant but not the main focus, that's what we mean. It's definitely, you don't want to miss it. I really do not, and I am not promoting not putting in biographical details. I really think that the birth date, the death date, and just a quick line about something quick about their upbringing, and or the education that brought them to their place, or like when they first received their position, the year, or like the first contribution, that's important. But you don't want to just end up being wikipedia.com and writing all about their life, that early life section, because it's really easy to fall on that, because you feel like you're writing an essay on this person and on their life, and it doesn't really make sense to just jump into all the things they did but not say much about who they are. But in the context of the SOR exam, where if you're doing SOR 1, you've got an hour and a half, and if you're doing SOR 2, you've got 3 hours to do all these different sections, I promise you, their personal life is not the most important thing. So your goal when studying your key figure or school of thought is to explain the contribution to the development expression of the religion, and to analyze the impact of this person or school of thought. So you want to go back to the why question. So they aren't a significant figure because they simply existed. What did they add to the life of the faith, and why are they still relevant? So all of these significant people and these school of thoughts are so significant that they have been chosen for this significant person school of thought topic. So you really want to stop and being like, what have they added to the life of the faith? Why are they still relevant? How is their impact still ongoing? I'm going to be real, I found contribution and impact hard, because a lot of the time it felt like they kind of overlapped. But what helped me with contribution and impact is, contribution is what they were doing in their life, like what they in their lifetime contributed to the faith And a lot of the time, those contributions were the faith of that time. So maybe they started a school, maybe they built a church, for example, or a sacred place. Maybe they wrote a book. That's those their contributions of their time. Their impacts are the lasting expressions of those. So their impacts are the lasting expression of the teachings. And when they've like the ongoing buildings of the church, if they were a missionary, and then now there's even more churches and churches in their name, all these different things. The impact is definitely more enduring, and it's like, how are they still affecting us today? While the contribution is very much what they did in their specific lifetime. That really helped me separate the two, because I feel like contribution and impact can really just get mixed up. And at one point I was like, aren't they the exact same thing? Because through their contribution, they're impacting people. But the impact is very much more an ongoing, like a lasting, and like how they're still relevant, even though their contributions are from years and years ago. How are those, and you can even link how those contributions are still impacting us now, and adherents of the faith now. So contribution is very much what happened during the lifetime of your person's school of thought. So what did they do? While impact is what happened after this person's death. So their legacy. That's the big difference. Contribution, what did they do in their life? And impact is what was their legacy after they died. So you should be doing that interchangeably, where you link their contribution to their impact. So by going on missionaries, they've inspired new missionary journeys, which has led to more churches being built and an ongoing effect. And then you can look at that cycle, for example. But making those connections between the two is really, really important. So contributions can be if they established churches, schools, did they go on pilgrimages, missionaries, what did they teach? Contribution, they'll be asking about the contribution to development or expression. I feel like there's so much terminology at SOR to know the difference between. And again, development and expression was another one where I was like, are they not the same thing? And a lot of the time, development and expression are used in the same sentence. So I would kind of see that and be like, oh, same thing. But the development is the act or process of growing or causing something to grow and become larger or more advanced, while the expression is how the religion is lived by the adherent. So if it's asking about the development and the contribution they made to the development of the religious tradition, that's very much more upon the lines of the churches, the schools. What physical acts did they do that helped grow the tradition, that helped bring followers to the tradition? What were those contributions? While when they're contributing to the expression, it's much more along the lines of teachings, of works that are helping adherents and acting as a guide for them on how to live their life, what to do in their daily lives, prayers, all the different daily acts to adhere to the faith. So I hope that makes sense. I always think like develop is like build. So what are they doing? How did they contribute to build the faith and to grow it? While express is when you act. So expression is more about, well, how are they helping adherents act out the faith, and how did they help adherents live out the faith and guide them in that way? That's the difference between the two. So I really, really recommend knowing the difference between development and expression and feeling confident with that. And then also knowing the difference between contribution and impact, because they are going to link all of them in different places. So knowing the wording is so, so important. And then impact is what happened after this person's death. So what was their legacy? And then how and for what are they remembered? So again, it should be done interchangeably, where you're linking the two. And again, it's kind of easy to link the two because naturally they do link. Their contributions have lasting impacts, especially when they've started churches that are still on, they've started schools, or they've like gone on pilgrimages that are now popular pilgrimages today. There are links between the two, definitely. Even the teachings you can look at, maybe they had the contribution of a teaching, and then now religious leaders are building off those teachings, are analyzing those teachings in new books to apply to our 21st century world. There's all different things you can say, but I think understanding the difference between contribution and impact is so, so important, because they just get really mixed up. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I was picture perfect SOR, I know everything student. I wasn't. I would get so confused with the two, and I'd find myself writing about the contribution even if I was talking about impact, and then I'd find myself talking about the impact when I was asked to write about contribution. So it just, you really want to make sure you know the difference. And development and expression, I really don't want to repeat myself. I know I'm sounding so repetitive, but development and expression is so, so important, knowing the difference, because if they ask you a question on the contribution to the development, and you're specifically talking about how the teachings help the religious adherents live out their faith, you're not answering that question, because the question is asking, well, what contributions helped grow the church? So if you were going to talk about teachings in that way, you want to talk about how the teachings helped bring followers to live out the faith, not more guide already. It's very much development. It's like growing and helping it become larger, helping it become more advanced. What did it do for the faith? So how is it helping develop the faith, not only in size, but also in, and especially with school of thought, but with teachings as well, development relates beyond size. It's also to the development of the faith and its complexities, and also like its spiritual element, like understanding it on a much deeper level. So it's growing the knowledge, but also growing followers to come towards. So, given that we're looking at the impact of the faith as a whole, your answer will normally deal with how that person or school of thought allowed adherents to better align with the core paradigm of their faith. So, guys, I would not leave you. I wasn't just going to say, bring in year 11 content and not show you how to do it. So, I wanted to make some direct connections for you. That way you're like taking out the narrow case study and you're linking it to the holistic view of religion. So most questions are going to draw some conclusion about how faith guides followers, even if it doesn't specify the concept of a leader. So making a connection between your significant person, school of thought, and how they contributed to a principal belief of the faith is A plus, band six in the making. So for example, when I said this before, if you're doing Paul of Tarsus, which is a really popular significant person for Christianity, you can say Paul of Tarsus contributed to Christianity through his prolific writings about salvation and baptism. So by that, you've got your significant person, but then you're linking it to the principal beliefs of Christianity whilst referencing the contribution. So it's just three for three. You're killing it. I can't even speak. But you're killing it, and it's just such a good link. Not enough people are doing it. So you want to stand out. We're all getting man sixes. Now, in terms of how many quotes I recommend, and every lecture series I get this, is how many quotes should I put in my response? And it's hard because, especially in the short answers, so hard to know how many to do, but this is my kind of guide, and this is exactly what I did when I was doing SOR. So 3 to 4 marks a question. They're really short. I would only do 1 quote. 5 to 6 I do 2 to 3, and 7 to 8 I do 3 to 4. Now for the 5 to 6 and 7 to 8, I really tried to get like the 3 and like the 4 and like on the higher end for quotes, just because quotes, it's not like English where you have to analyze them or you like are putting in a technique. That quote, you pop it in there and it's literally just backup of the point that you just said. And the quote itself should be a point. Like don't put a quote in if it's just for nothing. Put a quote in because it's backing up your evidence, or it's showing their contribution, or it's showing their impact, especially if it's a quote from the person, which is so, so important. But then also linking it back to quotes from the sacred text is good as well, because then you can show how they align with the sacred text, and then you're bringing back to year 11 content. We're just going back and forth, guys. We're just going back and forth. But if you are struggling with quotes in SOR, if you're being told you're not doing enough, this is the guide that I was using, and it worked really well for all my marks, but also for my memorizing, so that I wasn't memorizing too much, because especially SOR 1 already is so much, but SOR 2, the quotes just get in your head. I remember before my HSC exam, I was lying on the floor. Like, I really wish I was joking about this. I was lying on the floor, just like, I didn't even have my palm cards. I was just like announcing my quotes aloud, like right before I left for my SOR exam. But there's just so much, and especially across so many different depth studies. So this was a really good guide for me so that I wasn't overdoing it. But also just for your length, because SOR is a frustrating exam because you just get the booklets. And I'm not sure if you guys have seen past papers or you would know this yet, so maybe this is going to be news to some of you. But for SOR, for the depth studies and like your short answer sections and your essays, you're not given, obviously for the essay, you're given like the booklet that you would get in English, but for your short answers, you're just given a booklet. You're not given lines to write it. Like for your 5 marker, you're going to get like that amount of lines. You're going to get like the page, I think it's like 3/4 of a page amount of lines. So you just fill in the lines. But for your short answer sections, you just get like the booklet and you have to choose how many lines to do. So it's really hard. And sometimes I'd find myself writing like a whole page for a 4 marker. And I was like, what are you possibly doing? It's 4 marks. So SOR is definitely tricky in that way because you have to time, pace, and structure how much you're going to write for the short answers, which is hard because you can really lose track, which is why I found that memorizing this kind of quote table so I knew, and I was like, okay, it's only one quote, okay, it should only be this long, helped me because I don't know, my other content subjects, I was doing business, modern, I did legal in year 11, and then English subjects, everyone like had like the amount of lines you had to write, especially business, legal, and modern, like they give you the lines to write. You just pop in your answer. So it was really weird doing short answers in SOR for the depth studies and not having like a guide. I really like just having the lines because the general consensus is if you want to band 6, fill the lines. What are you supposed to do in SOR when you just get a whole booklet of like 6 pages, like empty pages, and you have to write like 1 and then start writing your response, and then 2 and then 3 for the 3 short answers on your depth study. Little bit strange. I hope I didn't break anyone's heart with that news. I don't know if many of you guys would have seen a paper or would know that yet. But yeah, in the paper, in your question booklet, they'll just have like 3 questions as dot points, and then you're answering that in a separate booklet with just lined paper, but not specific of how many lines you have to choose that. So I definitely recommend this. This helped me to overcome that. Now, in terms of structuring your significant person or school of thought paragraph, you want one body paragraph for each contribution or impact. So each paragraph should have a new point. Topic sentences relate to the main idea, and then you want to finish every paragraph conclusively with some final judgment or summary. Definitely don't get caught up in biographical details. I was talking about that before. They're important for your understanding, but they don't get you many marks. Like if you go and write this whole paragraph on Paul of Tarsus, they don't actually care. They don't actually care. They're much more fussed if you can write a paragraph about their contribution or impact. But in saying that, definitely have the year they were born. Don't worry about like 9th of December, 1300 BC. Like, don't worry about the dates. I just did the year they were born, the year they died, and then something about like their upbringing can be maybe like they grew close to the faith of this as a child. Or like they first studied it here and then they became at this university or this theological college and then they became ordained in this year at this school, at this university, whatever. That's that. And remember to link the impact to modern day Christianity and contribution to the development / expression of Christianity. So you also want to be linking back to the key paradigms, beliefs, and teachings. But impact is modern day Christianity. Like I said, guys, impact is the legacy. So how is this person, how have they impacted us today or impacted adherents of that religious tradition today? While contribution is the development and the expression of that faith, and in this example, Christianity, back then. So contribution is what they did in their life to help the development and expression of adherence at that time, while impact is today. Impact is after their life. It's today. It's everywhere since. It's any time since between they died and like right this second. So anything, any impact that they've had on the modern day faith. But yeah, that's significant person. I hope that helps out. I know hearing, you got to bring in year 11 content isn't going to be too nice to hear, but I hope you can see how making that connection just helps you stand out. Like I said, the markers are going to feel so repetitive reading the same response over and over again. So just having that one line, having that one area of difference, and especially even being selective with your biographical details, having like a structure that flows, so important in just getting straight to it. We've got a sample paragraph here. So this is on the significant person Imam al-Safi, and this certain paragraph is on how Islam assists adherents with daily living, which I feel like is always kind of the question you're going to get. It's going to be on like the daily lives, on the values, on living out their faith. It's always along those lines. What you'll see with this one is it's got the quotes, and it really mixes them well in, but the thesis is really strong. It's got the dates, but it's not like, their birth exact day, exact time, their star sign. None of it's important. Just get straight to it. And if you don't want to say they were born in this year and died in this year, just do it like this. It doesn't have to be this whole biographical Wikipedia paragraph. I really put this one in so you guys can see just kind of the insignificance of going too on about their biographical details. It's more just to build into that point. This one is contributions, but again, it's to jurisprudence, which is the sacred text. And they do use jurisprudence and that knowledge as a sacred text in Islam. So, and as sacred knowledge for Islam. So that already links back to the year 11 content, which I really recommend. Here we've got the Hanifi school and the Maliki school, which use the Quran and Hadith. So that's also bringing up his education. That's like a biographical points. But it really links to sacred text in this paragraph. And then those is Islamic beliefs. So have a read through of this one just as a guide of how you can connect back to the year 11 content. Now, in terms of the question, again, I know I'm sounding so repetitive, but many questions are often directly, and I mean word for word, from the syllabus. So please do not take the syllabus for granted. The 2021 HSC, and this is my HSC, guys. What impact has one significant person or school of thought other than Jesus had on Christianity? And then let's look at the syllabus learned to analyze the impact of this person on Christianity. Literally the same thing. They literally just took the syllabus dot point and made it into a question. And a lot of the times in the HSC, it's just going to be the syllabus dot points, which is why I really recommend studying the syllabus. Use the syllabus. Like if you can't find a practice question, write a practice question on a syllabus learned to. Write a practice question on a dot point from the syllabus. But studying the syllabus, notes, and practice papers are like the key to SOR success. Practice papers, there's so many because SOR has been around for quite a while and they haven't changed or updated the syllabus in years and years. So there's lots of past papers to do. But again, you guys are still early in the year, so you're not going to catch me saying, go sit a 1.5 hour paper. Go sit a 3 hour paper in like April. You'll hear that next holidays when it's time for trials. So fun. But yeah, for SOR, please do not take the syllabus for granted. That is your sacred text. I really mean it. A lot of the questions are going to be straight from there. It's kind of like a cheat sheet to get you ready because they're really using that as such a core. So let's move on to significant practice. Very, very fun. It's similar to your person paragraphs because you want to be analyzing how your prescribed practice allows the adherent to better connect with their faith, and then how that significant practice expresses the beliefs and why it's important. So it's different to the Ness's task, but it still best aligns with the impact aspect of the significant person. So what's its consequence in the modern world? Why do we continue to participate it? Why is it a significant practice? When you're talking about significant practice, the whole big idea is, well, why is it significant? What's so important about it? But you want to also be able to broadly describe the practice itself. And these small aspects of the practice are easy ways to structure your paragraphs or ideas. So, for example, I did synagogue services for Judaism, and then we would, in my paragraphs, I wrote about like descriptions of the practice and different elements of synagogue services and the different services to structure my paragraphs as different sections. And then always reference your sacred text quotes. I know it's hard, especially in SOR too, because it's double the workload, which is double the quotes. Sacred text quotes drove me insane, like memorizing all like the quotes and like where they're coming from as well, like the verses. Don't bring numbers into it. Why are we bringing numbers into SOR? Thought I was doing a content English subject. Don't know what's going on. This is a significant practice paragraph. So the beginning and ending elements of weekend worship, the gathering and sending are integral to understand Christian beliefs. So already it's using those descriptions of weekend worship, and then those specific sections to structure it. It's got the quotes. I really recommend, if you are doing Christianity, learn this quote. And this is what I mean in overlapping. There's this quote: "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." That's Matthew 28:19. I did that in my HSC, and I used that one because Matthew 28-19, that in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, you can use that in across other questions as well, because that's the Holy Trinity, which again is another principal belief, but it's also about baptism, which is the significant practice. So again, when you can make those links, and especially when you can cut a quote short, jump on it. You don't want to be using the same quotes for every single paragraph, but if there is true alignment, do it. And if it works, like in that case it does for baptism, but also if you're talking about the Holy Trinity and your significant person and their relation to the Holy Trinity, you could have a quote that they write about the Holy Trinity, and then how that reflects the Bible's description of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Big brains. I feel like I'm here to give like hacks to SOR. But even here, if you look here after that quote, "an instruction to create the kingdom of God on earth and fulfill their central paradigm," that quote directly is then linked to the central paradigm and to those big beliefs. In a way, this reflects the belief of the divinity and humanity of Jesus, with adherents working to emulate Jesus through the central tenet of evangelizing. Thus, the representative nature of the gathering and sending aspects of Saturday Sunday worship allow Christians to live out their key beliefs and paradigm, gaining a deeper understanding. So already in that, it's bringing up that, and it's also got Trinity up here, which I skipped across, but it's got the two beliefs in there, even though it's mainly talking about this significant practice. So essentially it's just name dropping, and it's just making that quick link. When I say bring up year 11 content, I'm not like start writing a whole paragraph, go back to your year 11 5 markers, bring up your essay. That is not what I mean at all. It's definitely more just having that like one line where you connect it back. It's just brownie points. We just want brownie points. We want to make our markers happy. We want to be the one good paper in a pile of 20 copies of each other, because everyone's writing the same stuff in SOR. It's definitely very hard to distinguish yourself in SOR because the content is all the same. I know everyone's doing different choices, but a lot of the time the content can all just be the same. So the only real ways that you can really stand out is structure, having really, really good structure, really good cohesiveness, and a strong thesis that you're connecting back to. So important. And then bringing up those extra little points, making that extra connection to the key belief, making that extra connection to the principal beliefs and to the sacred texts and to year 11 content, dynamic religions, all of that. Making those extra steps, and those three things are essentially the best ways that you can distinguish yourself, because otherwise in SOR, what are you really going to do when it's purely content? It's very much a content subject. In terms of other humanities, I in terms of applying it, it's really just applying the content to questions. It's not really problem solving. In terms of skills, it's very much just application of content. So content is so big, and the way that you organize, you structure, and you communicate that content is how you're going to stand out. So you really have to find a way to take literally what everybody else has and then portray it and convey it in the best way possible. And those are my 3 tips for doing that. We've got this one: a synagogue shul is considered to be a house of prayer, learning and meeting where Jewish adherents can express their central beliefs. Synagogue services such as prayer and physical features express the 3 foundational beliefs of Judaism: belief in one God, divinely inspired moral law and covenant. Through prayers such as the Shema and elements of the commandments, Ner Tamid and Yamuk, Jewish adherents can live out their beliefs, which emphasize loving the Lord your God along with keeping his commandments all the days. Through prayers and services, Jewish adherents worship God and therefore demonstrate their belief in one God, hence demonstrating love for the Lord. This is clear through the declaration of the Shema: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one," Deuteronomy 6:4, which encapsulates this monotheistic belief. So already in that, you can see that it's got connection to the foundational beliefs, but then it's also mixing in the content of the significant practice, and it's using descriptions of the elements of that practice to then structure the paragraph. So it's going all in. it's going all in. These are just some exemplar samples so you guys can see how to make that connection, because how many times I'm going to say it? I know, like, hearing year 11 content, I wasn't happy to hear it either, because it's like, I thought that was last year. Why do I need to learn anything from last year? But it's not necessarily like you have to revise anything. It's just making those connections. And I hope you guys can see how much they are going to elevate your response, because otherwise it's just content and everyone's doing content. You really want to stand out in SOR, and standing out is what's going to get you that extra mark. I feel like across SOR, a lot of the issues, and even with my students, is just like being 1 mark off, like 1 or 2 marks off, and you're like, what am I even supposed to do? I put in everything I had to, I answered the question. Those 3 things, but especially bringing in this content, it's going to elevate your mark, guys. And then we'll get finishing up on depth studies. So the ethics section of the depth study sits slightly apart from significant practice in person, but it's still involved with like explaining the teachings and then linking them with contemporary issues, which is so, so important. You really want to start with an introductory definition and then link to your religion. So, for example, if you're doing Judaism environmental ethics, you want to start with the definition of ethics and then link up to the Jewish environmental ethic that you're doing. So, for example, ethics are moral principles that govern a person's behavior, with environmental ethics focusing on protecting nature entities in a sustainable way. The basis of Jewish environmental ethics stem from the belief that they are stewards of God's creation. So already that's got the definition of ethics. It's also got a definition of environmental ethics, and then it's linking it to Jewish environmental ethics, which is doing like 3 in 1, but it's only 2 sentences, and it's really starting off your essay strong and then linking to the religion. The most important thing in our ethics section is distinguishing between the teaching and the issue. And so many students get these confused, and I did as well at first. But making the connection between the two can essentially break your response. So a lot of the time, and I was doing it at first as well, and then I realized, and I was like, gosh, why am I doing that? You'll get like the teaching and the issue confused, or you'll kind of like overlap them without meaning to, where the teaching might be that, like, for example, for the Jewish environmental ethic of being stewards of God's creation, which is also a Christian environmental ethic, that that environmental ethic, the teaching is to love the world and to treat the world, like to be responsible for God's creation, naturally, animals, for the environment, for everything. The issue would be climate change. The issue can be global warming. The issue can be she's literally synonym.com. I'm like climate change, global warming. I was about to say pollution. But the issue are like global environmental issues, especially for environmental ethics. You can talk about animal testing. I think that's what I think for stewards of God's creation, I spoke about animal testing, and that was my issue. And then after that, you're like, okay, the teaching is that Jewish adherents are stewards of God's creation. The issue in our world is that we are testing cosmetic products on animals. How can adherents, and what can adherents do to help overcome this issue? And then you can say, to support brands that are against animal testing, like Lush, to sign petitions against animal testing, to support if their synagogue is doing, or their community has specific practices against that, and then you get more specific. But it's very much a 3-dimensional thing, where you've got the teaching, then you're like, okay, this is the teaching, this is the problem, this is the contemporary issue of our world that is challenging this teaching, but this is how these adherents can follow the teaching, and this is what they can do to live that out. So the ethical teaching is the general principle in the sacred text, so it links to the paradigm and outlines how an adherent should live their life. There's no specific issue attached to them. So, for example, God created man in his own image can be a teaching for Christianity. But similar to your person in practice, you should aim to prepare 4 teachings, and that way you can write 4 paragraphs if needed to, just in case you get that. And if you're doing the depth study essay, 4 paragraphs, and having 4 teachings is a very good idea. But that's different to the ethical issue, because the ethical issue, for example, could be abortion or euthanasia, and that's reflecting the sanctity of human life. And then you'd make contemporary links to what different denominations or social campaigns are doing. But the ethical teaching and the ethical issue are very different. The ethical teaching is the kind of like the guide on how an adherent should live their life, what they should be doing. And the ethical issue is that's directly contrasting that. That's challenging it. That's the opposite. And what can adherents do to overcome that, to face that challenge, to play their role in upholding that teaching. That's the big difference. I feel like it's very easy to get lost. And then, even if you're not getting lost between the two, it is easy to get lost in just stopping at the issue or not really mentioning the issue, just getting straight to what different denominations or social campaigns they can support. But it's very important to very much have that three-dimensional where you're like, this is the teaching, this is the issue, this is how they can use the teaching to overcome the issue. So I really recommend using the 4-step plan. I did it myself and it just kind of works in terms of structure. You know, start by naming the ethical teaching. So for example, that adherents are created as stewards of God's creation. Then you want to describe using 1 to 2 sentences what the teaching surrounds and then have a quote about that. So for example, you could use this one. So God created man in his own image. Because he's created in his own image, he should therefore act as a steward for everything else that was created in God's image, which is all nature, all animals. And then you want to state the ethical issue and identify contemporary negative behavior and problems. So you can say the ethical issue of animal testing, and how companies are using this corrupt practice and the negative behaviors that that's manifesting as. And then you're like, however, adherents can apply this teaching by signing this petition, by supporting these brands, by buying from like these food companies, and supporting these different organizations to then face that contemporary ethical issue. So yeah, that really worked for me, just because when you're looking at this 4-step plan, you've got these two are the ethical teaching, that one's the ethical issue, and that one's the application to the issue. So naturally, by following that structure, you're already hitting off all three, and that's going to help you get to that higher band 6 criteria. So for example, this is an ethics paragraph where it's starting with that definition of ethics, and this is step 1. But then it's getting into what the teaching's about, and it's got a quote: God put him in the Garden of Eden to till and keep it, which guides an adherent's positive behavior to preserve the world. Then look at this. Deforestation is a contemporary environmental issue causing extinction of wildlife and significantly contributing to global warming resulting from urbanization and agricultural expansion. So instead of just saying deforestation is a contemporary environmental issue, which is what a lot of students will do, it's going that extra step and then identifying the negative behaviors and attitudes that are coming out of that and how that's affecting the environmental state of the world on a deeper scale. But then it doesn't stop there, because that's just the ethical issue. Yes, we've said the ethical teaching, this is the issue and the behaviors that it's manifest as, but this is what adherents can do. And this part is the most important, because the rest of it is more just kind of content improving it, while this is like, okay, this is how they're going to apply it, and this is where the answer to your questions will come in. So Jewish adherents serve and protect their world by promoting the preservation of natural parks through lobbying the local government to plant more trees and provide more recycling services at schools and workplaces. Simple lifestyle changes such as using recyclable bottles and recycled paper also demonstrate this teaching. They can donate to organizations like the Jewish National Fund of Australia, who only require an $18 donation to plant a tree in Israel. This ensures they serve and protect their world and forest, which links back to that teaching. So altogether, it's a 4-marker, but that 4-step plan of identifying the teaching, explaining the teaching, and then having a quote to back it up, identifying an environmental issue or the ethical issue that's affecting that. In this case, it's environmental, but generally the ethical issue and the behavior that it's manifesting, and then what adherents can do. And a lot of the time, the questions are, well, this one, it's very general to describe one Jewish environmental ethical teaching, but in the bigger mark questions, it'll be about how they can live out these ethical teachings in their lives, or how it affects their adherence. That part is where it's going to come in. But again, this question, guys, where's it from? Straight from the syllabus. You know I was going to say it. You know I was going to say it. So, overall message about the depth studies and what you guys have to do. Link to the paradigm and principal beliefs. I promise it's the last time I say it, but please, year 11 content, don't go back to your books. Have these slides and have a note of the principal beliefs, the main big belief, and then the sacred texts of your depth studies that you're doing, and then just name drop. It doesn't have to be a whole, this is a definition of the Trinity, this is a definition of salvation, this is a definition of, no, not just name drop, make that link. You're not obviously just gonna like copy and paste it in, copy and paste the principal belief in, but just having that link to it, and it's just got to be one sentence here and there. All the difference, all the difference when you get that extra mark. Remember this lecture. You also want to link to the sacred texts and link to contemporary examples. So this is all essential to getting a band 6, but a lot of the times it's forgotten when dealing with depth studies, especially when not dealing with ethics. So a lot of the time, because there's so much content, and I was a victim of this too, there's so much content in the depth studies. So the last thing I was thinking about is like, yeah, let me bring up year 11, let me bring this in. But then as soon as I started doing that, I saw better marks and I was more consistently getting full marks because I was consistently going to that fuller effort. So you want to see why these people teachings or practices are still relevant and what their impacts are. And then linking to the diversity of a religion is another little brownie point hack, SOR hack, guys. So the different school of thoughts or denominations. So for example, I did baptism for Christianity as my significant practice. So you can talk about how Christian denominations vary in the baptism method. So Orthodox churches favor immersion, where the individual is submerged into the water to emphasize the connection with Jesus' death and resurrection. Do you guys see? Do you guys see that? Because not only did she bring up another denomination, but there's also a link to a principal belief on it. And then on the other hand, Catholics use this method of baptism. And that way, you're bringing up a separate denomination, and that's showing the diversity and the dynamic nature of the religion, which again, brownie points for your marker. So I always recommend bringing up different denominations across the depth studies, just because it's that extra step and it's that extra thing that others aren't doing that's going to make you stand out. Message of this lecture is to just stand out. We want to be the star. We want to be the best paper that they read that night. So these are things that you can do. But now we're going to go into block 2. So fun. Religious expressions. That was heavy. That was heavy. Do not feel too overwhelmed. I know with the depth studies, it seems like a lot. And I know for SOR, when you know that you're going to do 3 depth studies, so fun. But even for SOR2, that is, but even for SOR1, the 2 depth studies and all the quotes, then structuring it, it's what if I get asked this, what if I get asked on that. I know it's definitely heavy, but I think that having those connections between them, and then also just using this as a guide, being able to come back, and that's why I really recommend downloading the slides. They're free for you guys to download, but just having them as a track and having those exemplars too to compare yours to. A lot of you guys would have seen they're not super long, they're not super chunky, but they are all full mark samples, which shows that you don't necessarily need these really long responses. You want to get straight to the point. And even though they're short and they get full marks, they're still referring to year 11 content. So how are they so perfectly summarizing content of now, answering the question, not too long, and then also bringing up extra content? Like, it's doing all of it at once. So I think that having a guide and having exemplars is so important in Year 12. This goes across all subjects, especially content subjects. And I'm sure if you guys are doing SOR, especially if you're doing SOR2, but across SOR, if you're doing very more kind of content subjects, I think that exemplars are the best way to go. Even for English and other subjects, this is advice just for HSC in general. But reading exemplars and reading full mark samples, just being able to see structure and how different people are using structure differently, I think is so important. For English, it helped me so much because I could see what different students were doing, and then I would take what I liked from different pieces and made my own style. And I very much did the same thing in SOR. So I think having a copy of these exemplars, but also searching for some online, so good. I really recommend it. But let's talk about it. Gonna get super repetitive again. I think the most repetitive thing I've said in this whole lecture is, I know I'm sounding repetitive, which very ironic of me. But once again, guys, another HSC question with direct wording from the stimulus. And I only put this in just so you guys can see the similarities between the syllabus and the exam. It's gonna be so simple. Like, I don't say it to be annoying. I'm saying it to help you. The syllabus is literally your best friend in SOR. Memorize it word for word. Use it as a guide. Make sure that you can, before you go into your trials and before you go into your HSC, I want you guys to feel confident that if you got any question, like if they used any question from this, if they made a question from anything from the syllabus, you'd feel happy to not well, who's going to feel happy to write an exam response, but you'd feel confident in answering that. I think that is such a good knowledge of preparation for SOR, and feeling like when you get to that point where you can read through the syllabus and you're like, okay, I can write a response on that. Okay, I can write a response on that. Okay, I can write a response on that. You are good. So let's look at this 5 marker, and that's what you're going to get, which is so fun for this multiple dot point section of the syllabus, and then you get 1 5 marker on one specific point. This question is, for some Australians, God is no longer important. Religion does not seem attractive as the country is becoming increasingly secular. With reference to the statement, account for the current religious landscape in Australia. This is exactly from the syllabus, and then it's this point that isn't, but it is referring to secularism, and then you can also draw on the other dot points. So this is the point, account for the present religious landscape. Look here, guys, word for word, and you're going to find it so often in SOR, which is why I really recommend just feel confident with the syllabus. But that's an example of how they're going to draw from it. Now, let's look at religious expressions. I really tried to make this short and a summary because I feel like the content can drag and it doesn't need to. It is actually pretty straightforward from just like the holistic view of it. And again, you're only writing a 5 marker on it. So the last thing you want to do is overstudy this topic, which you're only going to write a 5 marker on, and then understudy your depth studies, which is literally a 20 mark essay, or the 15 marks of short answer. It's not worth it. That's not me promoting like don't study for religious expressions, but in terms of priority and where you're going to prioritize your study, there's no point having heaps and heaps of notes on this topic when you're just going to get a mix of multiple choice questions and then a 5 marker. And the multiple choice questions, the answer is also there. So it's really just the 5 marker and then being able to pick that right answer. So I really tried to do a very concise, straight on it, to it version. So Australia in 1945 was monocultural, monofaith, and monocentric, but then 2023 today, it's multicultural, multi-faith, and multi-ethnic. So let's look at changing patterns of religious adherence. We've got the most updated statistics. So in 1945, 88% of people identified as Christian, but over time that has declined. So 2011 was 61, then 2016 52, and then 2021 43.9. So already between 1945 and 2021 you can see a massive decline. Now why that's happening is because of these exact factors. So because of denominational switching, immigration, secularism, and New Age religions, that's dramatically changing Australia's religious landscape. So in 1947, 0.3% of Australians identified as non-religious, but then by 2021, 38.9% are identifying as non-religious. So very, very big jump in secularism as well. And then for the first time in Australian history, no religion has become more popular than Catholicism. So between 2011 and 2016, an additional 2.2 million people declared no religion. So you can already see such a big gap. And this is how I wanted to show you guys so you guys can see the exact point that Catholicism and no religion kind of switched the ranks. And that was in 2016. And then you can see that really massive decline. But also just how rapidly no religion and secularism is growing, which is I think there's trends that you want to see. So I think making note of the trends, so Christianity is declining and secularism is on the rise, are 2 really important trends just to have that ingrained, and that's kind of your base, and everything else is, okay, why is that? And that's where you bring everything else on top of it. In terms of the other religious traditions, for Islam, the first significant Muslim migrations began in 1967, and it is showing quite significant growth. It's the second largest religious tradition in Australia. So in 2016, it was 2.6%, but in 2021, it's 3.2%. Hinduism is also showing growth. So in 2021, it was 2.7%. For Buddhism, it's 2.4% in 2021. Sikhism actually took over as the 5th largest religious tradition in Australia, and over Judaism, and Judaism has actually declined down to 0.4%. But in terms of the stats, guys, I actually remember last year during the SOR, like right before the SOR HSC exam, I literally made a TikTok about this specific point because I personally am not the biggest fan of this dot point, just because it's a lot of numbers and it's for the different religious traditions. Now, it's up to you how many numbers you want to be memorizing, I really recommend having like the 1947 data, or like 1945 data, like the first data recorded, and then having the most recent to show that gap. But I know that other schools say the first year of like recorded data, because for every single religious tradition, the first time it's recorded is different. It's not all at like a same point, depending on when that tradition started to become prominent in Australia. Other schools will say have the first and then the two most recent censuses. Definitely listen to the advice of your school and what your teacher's telling you for that one. There's no general like, okay, everybody just do this, but at least the first data and then the last data, so the earliest data and the latest data, just because you can show the gap, and then listen to your teacher for advice for the rest of that one. Now, why Christianity is declining in popularity is because of increasing secularization. There's dissatisfaction with traditional faith movements. There's also an aging membership, and that's also makes sense why across the years it's gone down. A lack of migrant intake, but also decline in regular attendance of religious services. So Sunday is no longer observed as a day of rest. It's not like shops are closed like they are in other countries on Sunday. Um, Attending services a lot of the time is seen as burdensome. There's disillusionment with church institutions, and there's also a shift in how social interactions take place. Immigration is one of the most impactful aspects of the current religious landscape. So post World War One, Australia underwent a massive change. And then from 1945 through to 1975, our population grew to 13 million, mostly from Europeans that were migrating from the Baltics, Eastern Europe, and Southern Europe, which really led to a growth in Catholic and Orthodox adherence among those years. And then, as soon as the White Australia policy was abolished in 1973 by Whitlam, there was even more religious diversity that was enabled, and that's when migrants from Vietnam, China, Cambodia, Thailand introduced Buddhism and Hinduism. Um, and they brought that also from India, Sri Lanka, and Fiji. And then the first significant Muslim migrants arrived in 1967. And then later, and since then, Muslim immigrants have come from Lebanon, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, and Pakistan. So that's the impact of immigration. Now, in terms of like the direct numbers, I think having the countries that they come from and that they were migrated from is much more important. Again, I don't want to scare you guys, but I have seen, and in my trials, there was a multiple choice, and I have seen it in HSC as well. And there's some of the worst multiple choice questions, but they'll have a specific question on which countries the religious tradition was brought by. So for example, it's like which countries first brought, well, which migrants first brought Hinduism to Australia, and then it'll have like different points and you have to choose, which is why I just recommend knowing like know the Baltics, Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, so Greece, Italy as well, and then know Vietnam, China, Cambodia for Buddhism, know India, Sri Lanka and Fiji for Hinduism. Just having like at least 2 to 3 of the countries just memorized of where they first immigrated from is very, very important. This is an example of the top 10 source countries of migrants between 2014 to 2015 of the migrant program. So it's showing most are from India, China, and United Kingdom. And then here on the side, we've got what religious traditions they're bringing with them as they migrate. Now, how and why has the religious landscape changed due to denominational switching? And that's another one. So the transfer of adherence from one Christian denomination to another is denominational switching. So there's still Christianity, but that's, for example, a Catholic switching to Orthodox or an Orthodox going to Protestant. It's very much more common in Protestant dominations than it is in Catholic or Orthodox groups, but they can switch for many different factors. Maybe it's because they like the minister. The style of worship also differs between different denominations, the sense of community, the proximity to home, and then activities provided by the congregation. It's also increased mobility in our day and age too, where people now find it easier to travel to a church rather than just favoring the local parish church. Now, you can go to a church that's an hour away from you. That's no issue. So denominational switching is more popular for that reason, and people are willing to make and can make the distance. While back in 1945, in those early years, that was much more of a struggle, and you would just naturally go to your local parish church. Some denominations are also seen as more liberal, for example, if they allow female ministers, while others are seen to uphold outdated hierarchical structures. So naturally, that is going to cause denominational switching, and some people would prefer that more liberal approach. And then specifically, and in terms of trends, there's identified that the Anglican faith has continued to drop, while the Pentecostal faith has continued to increase at the greatest rate. The Anglican is dropping at the fastest rate. So just having some of those little kind of trends, I feel like you can just really easily pop them in to your response. Another part of the syllabus is why have New Age religions increased in popularity, and how is that impacting the religious landscape? So in terms of what New Age religions are, and I was really confused on what New Age religions were, because it just felt really like there was so much that fell under it that I found it really hard to find like one idea for it. But that's why I definitely describe it, and I recommend having it as like an umbrella term, because it really covers the range of spiritual beliefs and practices aiming to foster individual fulfillment. So obviously there's all different types of New Age religions, but at the core, they're individualistic and liberal. They tend to be spiritual rather than a communal pursuit, and they're very much related to self improvement and self fulfillment. They're very big on individual fulfillment and for the individual, while the religious traditions have that, although they have the individual aspect, it's also the community aspect too. So, young people in particular are encouraged to explore new ways of thinking and understanding which are outside traditional religions and their code of behavior. So New Age religions can be followed as an alternative to or in conjunction with other more traditional religious practices. So you don't necessarily have to follow like a New Age religion and that's your whole religion. There's some adherents of traditional religious practices or traditional religious traditions that are still also believers of the New Age religion of numerology or astrology. They are dynamic in that way, but examples are, and I do recommend just knowing a few: numerology, astrology, yoga, etc. I remember using those three. In terms of how many examples to have, I always just go by three in SOR, um have three contributions, have three impacts, have three examples of each. I just feel like going by three, it's not too much to do, but it's also not too little where you've only got like one example. There's not enough to talk about. There's a wide variety of New Age religions, and many followers want to connect with nature or life force in a spiritual way. There's also the belief in the potential of the human being and desire for understanding of the self. But the reasons for why it's grown, there's a disillusionment with traditional religion and its form of worship. There's a frustration with the slowness of change, the desire to seek personal fulfillment, a desire to find new ways of seeking inner peace and awareness of the globalized world, the ease of travel, new forms of global communication, a lessening of commitment to traditional structures such as Christian churches. Again, I expect none of you to memorize all of these. I didn't even have all of these memorized when I was doing my HSC. I say go by three. I think having three reasons is always, it's just going to do it. It's just going to do it every time. So it is in many ways a direct response to the growth of secularism. And as secularism has grown, and that sense of no religion, people have been more turned to spirituality in themselves, rather than that communal aspect. So it is in many ways response to that growth. And then, for example, 6,600 people identify as Wakan, and the Mind Body Spirit Festival has 91,000 attendants. So that just shows the growth of New Age religions. Now, why the rising interest in secularism and how it's impacting the current landscape? There is very much in our society the belief that religion should not interfere with or be integrated into the state. So increased secularization is indicated by the increase in number of people responding no religion. So if you are writing a 5 mark on secularism, that's where you want to tie in that data and the difference between the first recorded data of no religion and then the most recent figure. A lot of people also feel a disillusionment with religions in general because of the actions of particular people, a belief that religion is inconsistent with science, and a feeling that the church is out of touch on current social issues such as homosexuality and women's rights. So having that disillusionment with those beliefs of that religious tradition naturally is drawing them closer to secularism. And at the same time, churches are still playing an enormous role in the provision of education, health facilities, and welfare. So this is really key to the concept of individuality and following personal ideas, instead of the group or organization. So because churches are still having that role in the community and that more collective, secularism is definitely more on the nature of individuality. In terms of ecumenical movements, ecumenism refers to the movements towards religious unity among Christian denominations. So, ecumenism promotes harmony, understanding, appreciation, and respect. It acknowledges that unity in Christ outweighs diversity in practice and beliefs, and it is the opposite of sectarianism, which refers to division and conflict between groups within the same religion. I always got ecumenism confused, but I just remember like ecumenism is within the Christian denominations. So they're all Christian. They are all Christian. It's different to interfaith dialogue because interfaith is between different faiths. So interfaith is a Jewish, Islam, and Christian walk that's sorted. That's different religious traditions. Ecumenism is the same religious tradition of Christianity, but the separate denominations. So the Orthodoxes, the Catholics, um, Protestants, Presbyterians, all the different groups. Coming through. So in 1977, and this is again, I don't want to say I hate, but it was frustrating in year 12 because this point came up and this point comes up in multiple choice, and it's like, what year did the churches combine to create the uniting church? And I've seen which churches came together to combine and create the uniting church, where it's got like the different churches. So I put this point in there and I stress it to you guys, learn this fact. Learn this fact because if it comes up, you want to know the answer. So it was in 1977, and this is kind of the core. So even if it wasn't coming up in multiple choice, if you were writing a response about ecumenism, you'd want to talk about the combination of the uniting church, because that was one of the biggest acts of ecumenical movements. So in 1977, the Congregational Union of Australia, the Methodist Church, and then the Presbyterian Church all came together to combine the uniting church, which is a denomination still of today. Now there's the National Church Councils of Australia, that acts as the umbrella organization uniting many of Australia's Christian churches. It's comprised of Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant variants. So again, ecumenism is the Christian denominations. It's Christianity, it's all Christian, it's all the one religious tradition, but it is the different denominations under it. They assist the community in issues of faith and unity, gender issues, Indigenous people, social justice, and international topics. It aims to promote an emphasis on similarities and appreciation for differences, a unified front on important issues. It provides practical and organizational cooperation and discussion on faith-based issues. It works with state councils and is also associated with the International Focused World Council of Churches. So you always want to add in examples, and it is good to, again, memorize just three examples of how they have acted out and what they like the different ecumenism acts that they've done in society. So, for example, the 2006 Social Justice Statement called for an action to eliminate Indigenous poverty. Then there's the New South Wales Ecumenical Council of 1982 that has 18-member churches, and it aims to further Christian unity by enabling members to address causes of division and to pray and worship together. They'll support the Christmas Bowl appeal. They've campaigned on behalf of Indigenous people. They've also addressed they've called the Australian government to address climate change and other environmental concerns. And they operate the House of Welcome, which you guys might have heard of. So there are all different practices that you can talk about, but I recommend just having three. For this one, not even necessarily, because there is quite a bit that you can talk about in ecumenism across the CCA plus the New South Wales Ecumenical Council. So maybe even just two would do the trick. And then again, ecumenism is different to interfaith dialogue, because interfaith dialogue is formal discussion aimed towards developing greater mutual understanding and acceptance between different religious traditions. Through building such relationships, different religions may choose to work together on common projects and stand publicly united on significant issues. So it is very big on those different religious traditions. And it provides opportunities for people of different faiths to understand each other's beliefs and to cooperate in areas where there is common ground. So examples of that are the multi-faith service projects and the interfaith peace service. And then you can use specific dates and where they were held out for which representations. But the biggest part of interfaith dialogue, I think, is the golden rule, because at the basis of all these religious traditions is that golden rule. So bringing that up in interfaith dialogue is really important, because that's the core and that's where they can share and act on that same belief of harmony, respect, and understanding for others. There's the Center for Christian and Muslim Relations, which promotes positive interaction and collaboration between Christians, Muslims, and members of other religions as a means of building harmony, respect, and understanding. They give talks, they run educational seminars for schools and for teachers. They have academic courses on interreligious dialogue. They promote the Golden Rule. They've got this Golden Rule poster that they launched at the New South Wales Parliament. There's all different examples you can use. So if you guys are struggling to find, you can use the ones on these slides. And just as an example of effect and analysis, we've just got this little paragraph. So our multicultural landscape means interfaith dialogue is essential for creating mutual respect and tolerance. Misunderstandings must be minimalized in order to preserve social cohesion. In an increasingly secularized society, interfaith dialogue unites religions and allows members to discuss common issues such as dignity, the sanctity of human life, justice, and peace. So it's really looking at how they come together despite those misunderstandings. They're trying to minimize them to have that social cohesion and then come together for their common issues that are arising in the different religious traditions. And then for the final dot point, which is about reconciliation. Reconciliation is a form of acknowledging past wrongdoing so that forgiveness and healing can take place. It's reconciliation for the stealing of land, the suppression of Aboriginal culture, stolen generations, and erased links to heritage and identity. There are different examples that you can talk about. Personally, I was speaking about the formal apology to the stolen generation, and also the week of prayer held by Jewish, Islamic, and Buddhist groups that they've been holding every single year since 1993. But it's up to you. These are just some examples that you can mention as a practice of reconciliation. The Anglican Church has also released statements, and you can use as evidence. You can use statements that different religious traditions or churches or specific denominations and groups have released on reconciliation. So the Anglican Church, for example, from the Perth Diocese, stated high rates of social dislocation and Aboriginal imprisonment is a direct result of the separation of children from their families in which the church was complicit. So you can use that as an expression towards reconciliation. So guys, which of the following lists only Christian denominations in Australia? Let's look at this one. I wanted to look at some sample multiple choice. So it's only Christian denominations in Australia. So naturally, we have to cross out some. I want you guys to have a little think. My best tip for multiple choice is, and I was doing it in my exams, like I didn't care, just cross out. Like when you've got questions like this and it's listing, go through it and cross out, and you're like, you know what, Hindu, that's not a Christian denomination, okay, it's not A. And then like cross the whole thing out, and that way you can clearly just visually see what the answer is and go through and get out of the order. I don't know, it really helped me, and just not make silly mistakes, because you read one word wrong here and you're there. Okay, so this is how we're going to do it, and that's what I mean by that. When you go through and if you use this method, you're like, okay, Hindu, that's not a Christian denomination, that's a religious tradition, therefore it can't be A. Buddhist, that's not a Christian denomination, and the Church of Scientology is not a denomination. So naturally the answer is Baptist, Pentecostal, and Salvation Army. Now, I remember seeing this question and I did not know, I'll admit I didn't know that the Salvation Army was a Christian denomination at the time when I had seen this question, but because I knew that those ones weren't, still got the answer right, which is why I really recommend using this method, because even when you don't know the answer, by knowing that, okay, it's not this, it's not that, it's not this, naturally you can find that answer even if you're not 100% sure. So I wasn't too sure on the Salvation Army. I don't actually remember learning that until afterwards, and then because I had crossed out the others and felt confident with the others and used this method of like error and like getting rid of the errors, that worked for me. So the answer is B. Hope we all got it. And what about this one? Which of the following is a common characteristic of New Age religions? So they value ecumenism, they all reject materialism, they focus on the spiritual needs of their adherents, or they integrate all non-Christian religions into a common set of beliefs. Have a think about it. Have a think about it. And think about where the words are coming to as well. It's New Age religions, but they're talking about ecumenism, materialism, non-Christian. Just a little bit of a think about that one. See, this is recorded now, so I don't want to give you guys too much time to think, but I definitely do know. Okay, guys, for this one, the answer is C. I know some of you guys might think D, they integrate all non-Christian religions into a common set of beliefs. But it's not just non-Christian religions. I also, when you first see it, you see reject materialism, but some New Age religions are purely for materialism. And if they value ecumenism, which is literally about Christian denominations, naturally, it's not going to be that answer for New Age religions. Now, let's finish up the last part of this lecture with some talk just about SOR study and how to get along with it, and then just a quick summary. So, not going to repeat myself. That itself is a repetition. The SOR syllabus seriously hasn't changed since 2009, so there are 14 papers that you can sit to prepare, which means completing as many past papers as you can will allow you to notice trends in multiple choice questions along with wording of questions. Now, when it comes to advice in practice papers, a lot of high achievers, and then you'll see content where it's like, sit this many past papers a week, make sure you sit every single exam. I am not the biggest advocate of that. I think definitely do as many as you can, but in terms of sitting like all these 3 hour papers in one sitting, especially like from this early on the year, is difficult. I think that with motivation as well, and just being able to handle it with your other subjects, especially if you're doing like multiple like you've got all the 2 unit subjects in your 3 hour exams, it's really hard to sit like a 3 hour exam for all your different subjects like all throughout the year. So at this point of the year, especially because it's still April and you guys haven't finished all the content, if you do want to start practicing in timed conditions, you can use the timing allocated on the front of the exam, and then just do a specific section. So you can just do, if you've finished your depth study by now, or just one depth study, do the 15-mark questions and time yourself and write that in a booklet, or do the multiple choice if you finish the first topic. But you don't necessarily have to sit like the entire paper yet. And then even when you do come to the end of the year, if you are feeling tired, and I would do this as well, year 12 is really full on. And I personally was not a wake up at 5 a.m., study for 6 hours type of girl. I really respect people that can study that much, and I will never discredit that. I value that so much in that discipline. But personally, I could not do it, and I didn't have that level of focus. So what I would do if I wanted to get some SOR work done, but I wasn't too bothered, I'd be like, you know what, I'm just going to do multiple choice. And you print out, or you just do it on your computer. You can do practice questions online. Just do some multiple choice questions. They're really light to do, but it also gets you practicing. The more multiple choice questions you do, you'll notice a trend, and you'll start to notice, oh, they've actually asked this question a couple of years ago and they're repeating it in different words. So that's kind of a hack to get around it. But memorizing the syllabus and practicing the papers will help you achieve that Band 6 result. Now, in terms of practice papers, like I said, it doesn't have to be the full paper in full-time conditions, every single one. Since 2009, that is not my advice at all, but getting as many as you can done. I definitely don't recommend going into the exam and not having done one full practice paper. You guys naturally in trials will get that practice, but I think it's good to have that practice on your own as well, to just sit for an hour and a half, sit for 3 hours, and just practice your timing, because no one tells you in HSC, okay, go to the next section, okay, stop now, go to this next part. You have to completely trust in your own organization and your own time. And for other content heavy subjects, for every subject, it's really hard to know, okay, when do I start, when do I stop? The only way that you can really practice that is by using your trials as a practice goes, like one of your first goes, and then using practice papers and kind of setting, okay, I usually need this amount of time to do the depth study short answers, and I usually will need this amount of time to do an essay, and then just getting used to your organizational structure to make sure you finish the exam, because the exam is heavy in content. There's a lot of writing to do, even more if you do SOR2. So that is very, very important. In terms of the rest of SOR before I finish, I wish you guys so well in your continuation of SOR. I know that this slide was heavy because it's honestly going through most of the topic. We didn't look at the first topic, but and of course religion and peace and religion and no religion for SOR2, but it did cover the depth studies. And I hope that even though it wasn't specific content on specific people and specific practices, although for some of you it might have been because the practice exemplars might be the significant person, the school of thought, the significant practice, or the ethic that you were doing. I hope that even though it wasn't specific, it could still be helpful to just see the gist of it, to see how it's structured. Again, the biggest thing in SOR to stand out is that you're distinguishing yourself from others. So I think that the best way to do that is in your short answers and in your essays. And kind of the only way to do that when it's such a content heavy subject is how you're structuring your information, that extra information that you're adding. And a lot of people will put like extra random information just for the sake of it, but it doesn't have much significance to the content. They'll add in this like really great, really random biographical biographical bi- biographical idea. No English here. No English here today. But they'll add in this really like random fact that has no relevance, and then they're like, "Oh, no one's going to have this." It's because it's not relevant. If you're going to add in and do something extra, just make sure it's relevant to the content, and that's why it's got to be the year 11 content. The year 11 content is going to do the trick for you guys, I promise. Otherwise, I think that that's all for SOR. Do not feel guilty with SOR if you're finding it dry. Do not feel bad if you feel like it's dragging. That is so normal, and it's very hard to not fall into a rut. With SOR, I felt like that at different points throughout the year where it's just so much content, and especially if you're doing SOR with other content heavy subjects. I was doing modern history, business studies, and then advanced and extension 1 English. So it was just so much content, so much memorizing. It was very easy to fall into that pattern. I was like, oh, SOR, and then it was SOR2 as well, where it's double the work. It's very easy to fall into that, especially when a lot of your subjects are like essay subjects and a lot of short answer writings. While in comparison, if you're doing more math and science subjects, it's a different kind of way, especially from math, the structure of the exam. So if you are doing a lot of content heavy subjects, I feel like my best advice for you for SOR is just trying to keep it as minimal as possible. I hope that you see that even in those exemplars, none of them were super long, super evidence heavy, too over the top. SOR is very much you say what you need to say and you move on. You do not have time in that 1.5 hour exam or 3 hour exam with all those essays and the short answers to just be dragging it. And especially without the lines to use as a guide, you really have to trust in your organizational ability. So that's why I think that having those practice papers and sitting like timed responses, even if you don't want to sit a full paper, do like the 15-mark short answer closer, and with time try to write up an essay. I know that it was really overwhelming for me at this point in the year when it's still April, and you guys that are watching this live, it's literally school holidays now. So I found it really overwhelming when I got advice so early in year 12. And I say early in year 12, you guys are halfway through, but it feels overwhelming hearing, do a whole 3 hour practice paper. I am very big on the advice that do what you feel right with. There's no point doing a 3 hour paper if you don't feel confident with the content. Like if you still are not too sure on a dot point, go back to that dot point and then sit the paper. Do not sit the paper if you don't feel good on your depth study. If you're like, oh, I don't really know the difference between the contribution and impact for that person, go back to that before you do the past paper, and do not rush yourself to do past papers. A lot of past students and a lot of high achievers are gonna promote practice papers, and I'm one of those students as well, because I think practice papers are one of the best, if not the best, study technique you can use. But this early in the year and still at this point, it's just very early, and it can feel really overwhelming to just sit and time yourself to do a 3 hour exam, especially when you guys haven't finished the content. But even when you first finish it, you want to let that content sink in. You want to feel confident with it. So before you guys attempt a practice paper, I really recommend have the syllabus printed. I had the syllabus printed for SOR and I had it on my walls. Not gonna lie, I had it on my walls because when you have like papers on your wall and you feel like motivated, you're like, look at all this work. She just went to the Nessa syllabus site and printing out. Like, it wasn't even like it was notes, but I had them on my wall, and then I would have a copy with me too, so I could just stop and read them. And then before I ever tried a past paper, I went through the syllabus and I would kind of just read it to myself and be like, okay, tick that off. I know how to answer this. Tick that. I know how to answer that off. My teacher for SOR2 also made us do fill in the blanks for the syllabus. She was very, very, very big that we memorized our syllabus. And she really believed that that was the key to achieving success in SOR, only because, like I showed you guys, so many of the questions are coming directly from the syllabus. So it really is your sacred text. But yeah, please don't pressure yourself. I know this is like the whole thing is like SOR study practice papers. I don't want you guys to think that you need to be sitting practice papers from now, full papers. If anything, you can try like one section or like maybe the multiple choice on the first topic, have a go at it, see how you go. But otherwise, pushing yourself too far, especially at this point in the year, it's not necessary and it's not necessarily going to benefit you. Do it when you feel ready. Don't do it because other people are doing it. Don't do it because everyone's saying to do it. Do it when you feel confident with the content and when you feel confident in applying the content. And I think knowing the content and applying it, really go hand in hand. You can have heaps of SOR notes, but I really recommend the less SOR notes you have, the better. By the time I had gotten up to my HSC, my depth study notes were so short and they were just quick like summary tables. You don't have the time, and I didn't have the time either to be memorizing all these super long notes. So as you're going throughout the term, it's fine if your SOR notes are building up, but for your study, you don't want all these different topics and all these really different long notes, and then you're going in and especially like for SO1, for example, on a depth study, you're only answering 3 short answer questions. So why have 20 pages of notes on the depth study? I think making it as short as possible and doing summaries. But again, to make those summaries, you need those notes. So as you're going throughout the term, stay up to date on your notes. It's very easy to fall behind. I did it as well. But try as hard as you can to stay up to date. If not, catch up. In terms of what to do for SOR these holidays, I don't recommend going too hard on study at all for anything, for any subject. These holidays, I really recommend that you guys take a break, only because you guys are halfway through year 12 now. So you don't want to study too hard, risk burnout, and then feel really exhausted when you get back to school. You kind of want to feel a bit refreshed going back. It's like, okay, halfway, like just halfway to go, and it really goes on acceleration and it's all turbulence from now on, because next holidays you're studying for trials, which is scary. I don't even like saying that because I don't want to freak any of you guys out, but year 12 is already going so quick, and I only say that so you're not pushing yourself too hard now when you can actually have a break. In saying that, I don't mean don't study at all, but these holidays in terms of SOR, I'd be very big on just revising. Download these slides. You guys have access to this recording for the rest of the year, and you guys can come back to this to come back to content, but also have the slides just as a copy to compare your responses to get notes from, to use examples from. But these holidays, I personally, and when I was in year 12 as well, I was focusing on just making sure my notes were up to date, because it's very easy to fall behind in SOR content. So just making sure they're up to date. You can practice a little section if you'd like, and go back over feedback. Maybe rewrite a response if you've been getting like 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 7, like I spoke about. Maybe look back on that response and be like, okay, where could I have changed it now? Oh, maybe I can add in a link here to the year 11 syllabus and the curriculum. Maybe now you can say, oh, I'll bring up a separate denomination. You'll structure the thesis differently. You'll use that 4-step plan for ethical teachings. I hope you guys can take the tips that you learned from this and apply that to your work, and then you can come back to that throughout the year. But otherwise, I wish you guys all the best in SOR. Like I said, I am an SOR lover. I really do love SOR, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it wasn't content heavy. Like, I didn't get into ruts and that it didn't just drag sometimes. For all of you guys doing SOR2, I believe in you. I know the content is just double. But I think that staying on top of your notes, by the end of your topic, having summary notes and just trying to get it as short as possible, and then using your notes in accordance with the syllabus, and just making sure that you can answer those questions from the Learn Tos and feel confident with answering those, is all key. You're going to find the practice papers easier, and then the more practice papers you do, the better organized and the more prepared you feel for the HSC and for your trials. So it's all kind of just a process. Do not feel discouraged if your SOR marks aren't at your best yet or aren't what you want them to be. It might just be something little like having and bringing in these extra little points, or structuring, or having a stronger thesis. But hopefully these tips all helped you out. All the best in time to come. Thank you for attending our lectures. We've got ones all across the week, but you guys can come back to this lecture recording and download these slides if need be. On our TikTok, I am going to be making SOR specific videos because I feel like just quick snippets can really help out. So watch out for those. But yeah, thanks for coming along, guys. I really hope that was a helpful experience. Sending all my love for all of you guys doing SOR and manifesting Band 6s for all of you.